Hello and welcome to the Radio Academy podcast with me, Roisin Hasty. Now this is going to be my last one for a while as I head off on maternity leave, so I've pulled out all the stops to combine as many of my favourite things all in one episode.
Today we're experiencing what life is like from the perspective of Honey the dog, a fox-red labrador who, at the age of 15, is beginning to slow down.
Come on then, in you come. Honey, sit. Good girl.
Yeah, as an animal lover, I couldn't not speak to the team behind Radio 3's Slow Radio episode, A Day in the Life of Honey the Labrador. It was lovingly recorded and edited by Faith Waddle at Tandem Productions, who used to live with Honey because she's her mum's dog. And during our chat, my Labrador Bailey also made her own cameo appearance, so look out for that and let's get to it. So I listened to this episode when I was on the bus on my way home from work, and it just made me smile from the minute it started, because as a Labrador owner myself, it made me realise that my dog's noises soundtrack my life.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. Yeah, it's funny, I think, with pets. I always you miss the little feet and you miss that presence. And I think if you own a dog or a cat, you only notice that it's not there when it's not there, and you only notice it's there when it's not there. So yeah, that was, I guess, that came into the making of it and the thinking behind A Day in the Life of Honey the dog.
Off you go.
She's a very specific personality of dog. I've known dogs before and I know other dogs, and Honey has something about her which is very knowing. She's a very knowing character, and she knows lots of different people. So she was adopted by my mum when my grandpa went into a care home when she was about 6, so almost 10 years ago. And so when she's living with him, she kind of took him on walks because he started to get Alzheimer's and started forgetting things a bit when he was still living at home on his own, and she would stick to the pavement and kind of take him home, and she developed, I think living with him developed a certain mind of her own. And so I kind of wanted to get into that mind of hers, and she was always a bit mysterious and had little quirks, and she knew loads of people in the street and kind of had her own relationships with people. She has one-on-one friendships that I just thought was quite interesting, and she's a complex character, and I kind of wanted to get into her mind. And then as she is getting older, she's 15 and a half, almost 16, which is really quite old for a Labrador, but she's still she's really healthy and can move around. I thought tying those two things together, so kind of getting inside her head and also being with her as she slows down and as she's maybe becoming more observant and more thoughtful in her old age, as humans do too. That was a kind of chain of thoughts towards slow radio. Yeah.
Because you produced this podcast episode for Radio 3, BBC Radio 3's Slow Radio. What was the brief that you were given for that?
So the brief is really just radio and sounds that allow people to wind down and that take them out of their own lives, take them out of their busy lives, and I guess just be at one with the sound and make what you want of it. And everyone, obviously with sound, there's no visual, so you can kind of use your imagination along with that. So I think it's a kind of escapism thing. I think it's quite different to watching TV, or I guess it's similar to reading a book. You're escaping and you're kind of getting into your own head as well as Honey's head. So it'll be so different for every person, because for me, I can listen to it and I imagine exactly where Honey lives, and I can see the street and I can see the park and I already know. But for me, it's quite interesting thinking about how other people will listen to it, because they might imagine their own home, or they might imagine a memory or something else. And I think that's quite a relaxing thing to be able to do. And even if you don't know what the sounds are, they're kind of relaxing in themselves, hopefully.
I know when I listened to it, because I was coming from the perspective where I also have a Labrador, although she's a lot younger than Honey. She's only coming up to almost 2. So I really wouldn't say a day in the life of Bailey would be slow radio. It would be like fast forward radio. But it really made me smile listening to the soundtrack of Honey's life, because it made me realise that Bailey has such a strong soundtrack of her own. And even moments of, there was a moment where Honey was taking a drink of water, and I was like, oh, Bailey drinks at a completely different pace to that. And it's a sound that I'm really familiar with. It was actually really comforting for me to listen to, because to me, my dog is a place of like, you know, she's home for me. I get a lot of happiness out of her.
Yeah, you're so right. And they have different ways of walking, and they're just as individual as us, and they have such strong personalities. And I think Honey, because she is slow, her personality kind of fitted the slow radio brief.
Yeah. So without completely shattering the illusion, was the recording of this more complex than simply following Honey for one day? Did you have to plan, okay, that's going to sound nice, let's go to that, let's take a mic to this, and did having the recording equipment around her make her change her behaviour at all? Did you have to think about that?
Yeah, I did. So we did have we had quite limited resources for it, and it was I just did it completely on my own. Obviously with all the people who were around Honey and stuff getting involved, but it was quite, I had to kind of work out a way of doing it quite compactly. So I used a lapel mic on Honey, so a lapel mic and a field recorder attached to a harness that she uses for her seatbelt most the rest of the time. And she was fine with that, and she was completely fine with it at the beginning. And then gradually she sort of became more aware of it, and she was like, oh, you're putting that thing on me again. I thought that was a kind of one-off thing, because I did do it over more than one day. It wasn't multiple days, but it was maybe 2 days. Or like bits and pieces, just kind of getting on, seeing what she was doing, and then trying to get into the different sort of sections of her day. But I had to kind of give her big breaks between the lapel mic going on and off, because she just became aware of it, I think, on her back. And then as well as that, I used I did try and rig her up with a stereo mic, but it just didn't work. The handling noise was just too
rustly.
It was really difficult. We had to have a really subtle small mic to actually get her perspective, like from her head, as it were. But then I did a lot of just like really carefully following her around with a stereo mic above her head, like just above, so it was like the stereo perspective from her. And then through those 2 recordings, I kind of combined them and used a mix of the 2, and that's how I did it, really.
I mean, the golden rule in TV and radio is they say don't work with animals and children. Would you say that Honey's the exception to that? Did you enjoy working with Honey the Labrador?
Yeah, I from my personal experience of working with Honey, I would wholeheartedly recommend it. It was really, really fun and interesting, because obviously the way you encourage a dog is very, very different to the way you encourage a person when you're producing them. But yeah, Honey was great. She was the perfect pace, I think. Maybe slow animals is the way to go, tortoises.
Yeah, maybe. And what I found interesting about the episode was that we're so used to, with radio, having speech or music or something that can transition from one sound into the next. But this episode was almost like pure soundscape. It was just one fluid movement through Honey's day reflected through sounds. Did you find the editing process was more difficult because of that, or more straightforward?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because in some ways it was easier, I think, kind of creatively, because I felt like it was kind of like painting. I could just put stuff in and then cut stuff out and then get to the interesting bits, and then it was quite easy to create transitions because I had so many sounds that I'd recorded that, and a lot of them could fit together. So in that way, it was easy to make it smooth. I think sometimes when you're going from an interview to a soundscape and music, and you have lots of different things, and for like a documentary or something, it's harder to get that completely not noticeable when you're going between them, kind of, if you know what I mean. But I think with this, it was quite nice. It felt very free in some ways, but then obviously I was following Honey's day, so it was kind of easy because I had that clear framework. I knew that I was going from breakfast from getting up to going to bed, and so I didn't have to make too many big decisions really. I just got all the best bits that I'd collected really, and it formed the day in 30 minutes. But it was really fun to edit. It was really nice.
But probably very relaxing to edit, and it's so nice that you've got that all on a recording because she's obviously such a beloved pet as well.
Yeah, it is really, really nice. And I think because, I mean, when she does eventually, when Honey's not with us anymore, it'll be a really nice thing to have, I think, for everyone who knows her.
I love that. The way that we always end this podcast is we ask our guests to go through 3 pieces of advice that they've learned from either working on the project that we're talking about or from their experience in this industry in general that you would want to pass.
Oh no.
Sorry. Someone's just at the front door. Bailey, come here. What's this? Shh. Bet Honey wouldn't do that.
No, Honey stopped barking actually. Which is quite weird. She now only barks if she sees a squirrel in the garden.
See, this is the mad life of a Labrador. Bailey's gone from barking at the front door to curling up on the sofa looking like she could fall asleep any minute. So, good girl.
Yeah, like she's completely forgotten. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on from that interruption, what would be your 3 pieces of advice to anyone listening to this podcast that you've learned from either working on the project we've been talking about or that you've learned in general from working in this industry?
Okay, yeah, I think with this project, if you're doing something where you're outside, inside, moving into lots of different spaces, just get as much atmos as you can from each of those spaces. It's really helpful for transitions or creating a soundscape really. And it's easy to not think it's easy to think you have enough, and then you get to editing and you just really could do with that bit of glue from the back door area, whatever.
Yeah, no, it's a great one. I remember being told that wherever you are, whatever location, just record a minute of wild track of just like pure background noise, just in case you ever need to like re-record something, you can then lay it underneath.
Exactly, and I find it easy to forget that. And obviously with this, I did get loads, so it was fine because the whole thing is kind of wild track and atmospheric. But with any project, it's always useful, and it's easy to get carried away with an interview in a location and then forget to get wild track. So that's quite a basic one. What else? I think some ideas just come from what can seem like a very small moment or thought can end up being more of a universal thing than you may realise, and that could bring in different perspectives. Yeah. And then a third one, when working with children, there weren't that many children's voices in the one with Honey, mainly Sky, her friend. But I think with working with kids kind of under 10, it's nice just letting them speak. And I think kids can be way more on it than people give them credit for, I think. And they have amazing ideas and they have ways of thinking about things that you might not have thought of. So I think if you put on your own ideas to a kid, they can get a bit confused and sidetracked because it's like an adult perspective. But if you let them speak and just kind of record it and wander around and let them do their thing, they can come up with amazing things that you might not ever have planned for. I really hope you enjoyed listening to that as much as I enjoyed speaking to Faith about it. I think you could tell that Labradors are one of my favourite topics. I also highly recommend listening to that Slow Radio episode in full. Honey sounds like an absolute dream. Well, that's it from me for a while. I'm going to be leaving you in the very capable hands of Christian Hewgill whilst I'm on maternity leave. So if you have any ideas, you can send them to him at podcast@radioacademy.org. Thanks for all your support so far this series. I'm looking forward to getting back to you on the other side of having a baby. Thanks for listening.